right now, first things first, I had a cheating wife to deal with. I walked up to the counter and asked to speak to Darren Ranger. The attendant picked up the phone and called his number. After a few rings, he answered. I took the phone from the clerk. I exhaled. Just like that. May I speak to Diane Walters, please? He faltered. There's no one here by that name. You must have the wrong number. Just tell her there's been a death in her family, I continued, raising my voice. Just tell her that her husband died. He died today. I found myself at the Hilton Hotel in downtown Albany, not far from the Capitol building, around 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. However, I wasn't there as a guest. I was on a mission to find my wife. Unbeknownst to her, I knew about her boyfriend, and it had been eating away at me for quite some time. Every day, the realization gnawed at me, pushing me closer to taking action. I had deliberated extensively on my course of action. There's only so much a person can endure. For months, I turned a blind eye, hoping her affair would fizzle out, but it persisted. Diana continued her relationship with Darren Ranger, all the while maintaining the facade of a devoted spouse. Our discussions about future plans and aspirations felt hollow. She didn't mean any of it. I struggled to comprehend what I had done wrong to drive her into the arms of another man. Obviously, something was lacking. I wasn't meeting her needs, not to the extent or frequency she desired. I toyed with the idea of allowing her temporary freedom before reeling her back in as a faithful wife, but deep down, I knew it was futile. Once she had a taste of someone else, reconciling would be arduous. Months passed, yet Diana showed no inclination to change her ways. That's when I resolved to end it. Admittedly, accepting this decision took time. I dedicated long hours to work, often laboring for 18 hours a day over several consecutive days. Could my relentless work schedule have driven her to seek solace elsewhere? Was I inadvertently neglecting her? I doubted it, but evidently, something was awry. If I failed to meet her needs, why didn't she communicate with me? Why resort to clandestine affairs instead of openly expressing her desire to move on? Why persist with hollow declarations of love? Why not take the mature route and discuss separation or divorce? Countless questions plagued me, yet answers remained elusive. So I came up with a plan. Maybe not a perfect one, but one that I can live with. I wasn't at the hotel to be violent. Hell, it wasn't worth it. At that moment, I wasn't going to do something stupid and beat the crap out of her boyfriend. No, my lawyer had warned me against it and told me it would end badly. I'd end up in jail and get a criminal record. No, I was just there to end it, to put her out of her misery and maybe give her a few minutes of misery. You want to know a little bit about me, don't you? So my name is David Walters. I'm 31 years old, born and raised in the Albany area, and I work as a physician. I'm an emergency room physician, and I practice at the main hospital in town. Or at least, I used to practice. I have a mother, father, and brother, all of whom live nearby. I also have a wife. I recently applied for a leave of absence to recuperate. I'm burned out, I admit it. I haven't told my wife about it because she doesn't care. My own doctor advised me to do this so I could properly recuperate and not die of stress early. I've been burning the proverbial candle at both ends and sometimes in the middle. I desperately need rest. After finding out that my wife was having fun with other men, I finally decided to take a break. My wife's name is Diane Walters, née Stapleton. She's 30 years old, and she works for a national bank in the city. We live in a pretty nice 2-bedroom apartment near the hospital, and we don't have children. Thank goodness for that. Diane's height is about 5 feet 8 inches. She has long, thick brunette hair that comes down below her shoulders, and she is very good-looking. She attracts men's attention very easily. Too easily. She's easy to look at. We met at university. I liked her from the very beginning. I met her in an English class I was taking in my second year. Science students had to be able to read not only technical literature but also to understand it. My main focus in that class was Diane. I asked her out, and as they say, the rest was history. Until today. After university, Diane and I lived together for almost 2 years and got married right after I finished medical school. I managed to graduate without the huge debts that most medical students face. I was financed by Mom and Dad's bank. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, a poor little rich kid complaining and crying about his great misfortune. That's a load of crap. While I was in school, I worked damn hard every summer to earn as much as I could. My family helped me out by making me promise to pay my parents back when I graduated high school and started making money. Now my family is living well. My father has a construction and contracting business, and he is doing very well. He has over 100 employees and a warehouse full of materials and equipment that he uses in his business. I worked for him as a laborer during the summer, earning minimum wage to pay for tuition for the next year. So I know a thing or two about hard work. Now I work 18-hour shifts at the hospital, and I'm on call on my off days. But you don't care about that, do you? You want to know what's going on with my wife at the Hilton. You want to know what I'm going to do with her. Well, that's about to happen. I've said before that I've known about her having a boyfriend for some time now. Now, why haven't I done anything about it yet? Well, that's a fair question. I have to say that I went through several stages of grieving the loss of my marriage before I decided what to do. Yes, at first, I was stunned to realize that Diane was cheating on me. After all, I thought we were a team. I thought we had the same desires, aspirations, and plans. And then I find out she's hooking up with this Darren guy. What the hell? We talked about starting a family, we talked about what kind of kids we wanted, we even started thinking about names for them, names for boys and girls. And we even looked at houses in the suburbs, for crying out loud. We talked about her taking maternity leave at work once we had a baby in our family. We discussed the pros and cons of her becoming a stay-at-home mom and taking full care of the kids. Her own mother did the same for her brother, and sister. We had already opened a savings account to put a down payment on the house and pay for baby expenses. My salary at the hospital was growing rapidly. Last year, they paid me $120,000. I paid my taxes and paid my parents back almost $10,000. Diane was paid well at the bank and was making about $80,000. We were in great financial shape, and my job as an ER doctor had great earning potential. I would likely be making almost $600,000 a year in 5 years. We shared dreams, we made plans, we told each other every day that we loved the other person. I loved my wife, and she loved me. At least, I thought she loved me. Now, not so much. What happened? I found out about Diana's affair quite by accident. A nurse from the emergency room was at a downtown restaurant on a date with her husband. She had met Diane the year before at a Christmas party at the hospital, and being good with faces and names, remembered that she was my wife. She also recognized the guy she was with. We'll come back to him. I watched as Diane and her boyfriend walked through the hotel lobby and headed for the elevators. They entered one of them, and he turned to press the button for the floor he was renting a room on. I watched as the indicator light above the elevator stopped at the number 12. I sat down, looked at my watch, and considered my plan one more time. In the back of my mind, I knew that this was what I needed to do to make things right in my life. I can only tolerate so much disrespect, and today, I will right this little injustice. Today, I'm going to stir the pot. We'll see what happens. I walked up to the front desk and asked to call the room occupied by Mr. Darren Ranger. Mr. Ranger is the owner of a local business, a business that does landscaping and property maintenance. Mr. Ranger lives very well for himself, his wife, and 2 sons. So well, in fact, that he has found it necessary to have an affair with the loan officer of the bank with which he does business. That loan officer happens to be my wife. Darren and Diane had been enjoying each other's attention for almost 2 full years. Yes, I couldn't believe it when I found out the extent of her infidelity. I found out quite by accident when one of the nurses in the emergency room was working the same shift as me and happened to mention that she had seen Diane and her friend Darren at a restaurant downtown. The nurse had been there with her husband and friends the previous weekend. That same weekend, I was working an 18-hour shift to deal with the shootings and stabbings we see all too often when alcohol and drugs are in full swing. She knew Darren because his company did retaining wall work for her husband in the backyard. There you go, so the cat was let out of the bag. When I was home a few days later, I casually mentioned to Diane that Rhonda had spotted her at a restaurant last week with a friend. I didn't mention that I knew it was Darren's, but I asked about the menu and the quality of the food and maybe we should go there sometime. The pale expression on Diane's face quickly recovered, and she said, "That's fine," and left it at that. The following week, I did a few things. I talked to my father about what I could or should do if I suspected my wife was unfaithful. He was shocked that Diane could do something like that. I know he really liked her and expected us to have children soon. From our conversation, I derived a basic plan of action to protect myself. We had a long heart-to-heart talk, and at the end, we agreed that he would not share information with my mother. I went to my supervisor at the hospital and shared the information with her as well. She agreed that I needed a vacation to deal with She was familiar with my wife, and I could tell by the look on her face that she was disappointed that Diane might have done something like this. But she also realized that it happened too often. We agreed that I could take a 3-month vacation, and then we would review my work assignment. I even met with the in-house psychiatrist to talk with him, and she agreed that the stress of my family situation required some time off to recuperate. My next assignment was to contact the investigative agency and have them find out what Diana had been up to. It only took them a week of digging, and they put together a clear picture of what she and Mr. Ranger were doing, where they were doing it, and how long they had been doing it. The hotels kept records, and for a reasonable monetary fee paid to a willing clerk, they would make those records available to anyone interested. Not that there is a great statewide law about the confidentiality of hotel records. A $100 bill handed to the porter, known to the investigator, led to a history of Mr. Ranger's business at the hotel for the past 2 years. It seems he had rented a room there almost every week, regularly like clockwork and almost always with the same woman. The clerk recognized the woman in the photograph as the one who had accompanied Mr. Ranger. The woman in the photograph was Diane. The next thing I did was go to the bank, interestingly enough, not the one my wife worked at, and withdraw every dime I could without closing the account I had there. I have my own credit card, so I didn't have to do anything. So, armed with the knowledge that my loving wife is cheating, I decided it was time to do something about it. I knew Diane would meet her boyfriend after work, have dinner, and spend a few hours in a hotel room. She thought I had a long shift at the emergency room that day and night. He needed to get home to his family, so he didn't have to stay up late. That morning, as soon as she left for work, I packed up all the things I planned to take with me and then went down to the garage and started loading up the bike. I loaded a few things into my car, my used trusty Subaru Outback, and asked my dad to pick it up later that day and leave it at his house. I wasn't taking much, but I had everything I figured I would need for the next few months on the road. The rest of the day was spent sorting out the little things I wanted to take or get rid of. It was a strange day. There seemed to be a death in my family. In fact, it was the death of my marriage. My bike is a 2016 Honda Africa Twin equipped with racks, fog lights, heated grips, navigation system, crash bar, and a few other items that make it perfect for long-distance travel. All I needed to take with me was a few changes of clothes, a toothbrush, rain gear, and an iPad. I planned to stay off the freeways and see the countryside. I decided that I would stay overnight in small budget hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, and eat at local establishments off the beaten path. I will make occasional rest stops in places where there is plenty to see and do. My father always told me that change is sometimes as good as rest. Well, if ever there was a time for change, this was that time. My plan was to make one lap of North America. I mapped out a route that would take me along the New England coast to Maine, then into Canada to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, then by ferry to Newfoundland with a landing at Port aux Basques. I would tour the island and leave via Argentia and then return via New Brunswick to Quebec, Ontario, and then west through the prairies and Rocky Mountains to British Columbia. From British Columbia, I planned to take the coastal highway south to San Diego and then take a route through the mountains to the Midwest and make my way back through the Midwest to Albany. I figured it would take me 3 months, maybe 4, and by then, I would be able to exorcise the demons enough to move on with my life and get back to work. I seriously considered taking a job with Doctors Without Borders for a year or 2, just for a change of scenery. I figured there had to be better places to do good work than an ER in Albany on a Saturday night. The GSWs and stabbings were starting to get tiresome. One can only tolerate so much stupidity. Right now, first things first, I had a cheating wife to deal with. I walked up to the counter and asked to speak to Darren Ranger. The attendant picked up the phone and called his number. After a few rings, he answered. I took the phone from the clerk. I exhaled. Just like that. May I speak to Diane Walters, please? He faltered. There's no one here by that name. You must have the wrong number. Just tell her there's been a death in her family, I continued, raising my voice. Just tell her that her husband died. He died today. Tell her David Walters died today. There were no voices in the receiver, but I could hear noise in the background and muffled speech. I repeated, raising my voice a little. Just tell her husband is dead. And then I hung up. When I handed her the phone receiver, the receptionist looked at me wide-eyed. I looked at her, smiled, and thanked her, then turned and walked out of the hotel. My motorcycle was parked out front. I put on my gear and helmet and waited for a few minutes. Diana ran out of the hotel into the street. It was dark enough that she didn't see me or the motorcycle as she hurried out of there. She quickly got into a cab. I figured she was headed to our apartment. Her apartment now. I, on the other hand, was headed for freedom. Diana, oh my God, someone called and told Darren that David was dead. What the hell? I needed to get home right away. I got dressed as fast as I could and ran for the elevator. A few seconds later, I was outside and took a cab home. I got to the apartment building and ran inside. The elevator took forever to get to our floor. As soon as the door started to open, I ran down the hallway and struggled to put the key in the lock. I ran inside and called out to David. I searched all the rooms, but he wasn't there. I sat down at the table to catch my breath, and I felt my heart pounding. I rummaged through my bag for a cell phone to call his father, and then I saw an envelope on the table. My name was printed on the front. I picked it up and opened it. It contained a single piece of paper and David's wedding ring. He knows. I unfolded the piece of paper and read it. Diana, you can consider me dead. Our marriage, by all accounts, has been dead for a long time, and that's why I left. I took what I wanted, the rest is yours, and you can do what you want with it. I have notified the management company that I will no longer be living here, so you can decide whether you want to stay here or move. The choice is yours. Don't look for me. I'm on the road for a break from work, life, and your fun with Darren Ranger. It's clear to me that you're no longer interested in being married to me. Enjoy your life, and I wish you all the best, David. One last thing, my attorney will contact you shortly and provide you with information that you may or may not use. That's your choice too. Oh, what am I going to do now? I never thought David would find out about Darren. There was nothing serious about the relationship with Darren, it was just fun. David works atrociously hard, and even when we do get to spend time together, it seems like a lot of things get in the way of our intimacy. Honestly, I was lonely for a man's touch. I knew that David would slow down at work, and when we had a predictable schedule, we would pick ourselves up and be just like every other married couple. I thought that eventually, we would have a couple of kids, buy a house, and become a normal family. That plan went to hell. Darren is a very charming guy, and it was easy to get infatuated with him. The more I thought about him, the easier it was to imagine that I could have him once or twice a week, and it wouldn't interfere with my marriage. I tried to call David on his cell phone, but found that his number was no longer in service. I called his mother and father and pounced on them. His father refused to talk to me, saying only that David had left and I could go to hell. I looked around the apartment again and saw that most of David's things were gone. The furniture was still there, but I noticed that his closet was empty. A few books from the shelf in the spare bedroom were gone, and there were a couple of black garbage bags in the kitchen. Opening them, I saw that they were David's things that he had obviously decided he didn't need. I had no idea what to do. I was sitting at my desk, and it felt like my life had evaporated before my eyes. I'd screwed up big time. I decided I would go to his family tomorrow and try to figure out what I'd gotten myself into. I tried calling a few of his friends, but got nowhere. All they could tell me was that they thought he was busy at the hospital and that they hadn't seen him in weeks. No one at his brother's house answered, and I didn't have any of their cell phone numbers. Damn. I went to the refrigerator, found half a bottle of wine, and poured it into a glass. I sat at the table, staring at the note and my husband's wedding ring, thinking about how stupid I was and trying to think of a way to fix this. Whatever the fix was, it wouldn't come without pain on my part. I screwed up big time. David, that first night, I hadn't traveled very far. It was almost 10 p.m. when I saw my wife run out of the Hilton Hotel and into a cab. She thought I was at work in the emergency room and would be there until tomorrow. She figured she would have plenty of time to spend with her boyfriend and then come home and clean up. I engaged the starter, and the bike immediately came to life. The Africa Twin is a DCT, that means it has a programmable 6-speed automatic transmission. It also means there is much less rider fatigue on long rides. The 1,000 cubic centimeters bike is a beast. It can go for days at high speed and carry me and all my gear. I have no death wish, so I'm always very careful when I ride, looking at everything around me and anticipating what the cars and trucks will do. Situational awareness is really important for safe riding. I've seen a lot of kids brought to the emergency room who were going too fast on a crotch rocket and generally weren't good riders initially. This usually leads to a crash. I've seen kids killed because of stupid actions on a motorcycle and many others permanently crippled. Not a pleasant ending. The destination was only a few minutes away. It was east of the river at the Holiday Inn Express, just off the highway. I was exhausted, physically and mentally. I wanted to eat, take a hot shower, and get a good night's sleep. I checked into a room, and I realized that the hotel was where my marriage ended. Now, I was at the hotel, starting my new adventure. How appropriate. How ironic. Diana, leaving the apartment early, I drove to David's parents' house and rang the doorbell. I noticed that David's car was parked in front of the garage, so maybe he was here. Miriam, his mother, came to the door, and when she opened it and saw it was me, she immediately closed it in my face. I pressed the doorbell button again and waited. I kept pressing the button until a few minutes later the door opened, and this time it was John, David's father. He was just a wonderful man. "What the hell do you want, please?" John asked. "John, I need to talk to David, please. I need to see him." "Ask him to come out," I pleaded. John frowned. "You're too late. He left Albany last night. I don't know where he is, and frankly, if I did, I wouldn't tell you." "John, I need to talk to him and explain everything. If he just listens to me, I know we can work through this." "What the hell? You've had a long-term affair with another man, and you expect your husband to just say, 'Oh, don't worry, honey, it's okay'? Like he will? Get your cheating ass off my doorstep, and we don't want to see you here anymore." With those words, he slammed the door shut. I sat on the step for a few minutes trying to figure out what to do. I rang the doorbell again. I kept ringing until John opened it. Before he could say anything, I blurted out, "Please, give him a message from me. Tell him I'm desperate to talk to him. Just ask him to call me, please. I turned and walked back to the car and sat for a few minutes, hoping John would tell me how to contact David, or if he was in the house, come out. But he didn't. He closed the door, and that was the end of it. Nothing more. I returned to the apartment and found a letter taped to the door. It was a letter from David's attorney, Leanne Collins, informing me that I had been dropped from David's health insurance policy and all financial assets had been divided equally, with David's portion withdrawn from all bank accounts. In addition, the life insurance policies had been amended so that the beneficiaries were now his parents. The letter also advised that David Walters did not wish to have any further contact with Diane Walters, and therefore, any correspondence that Diane Walters may wish to send to David Walters should be in writing and sent to his attorney. Any correspondence will be held until such time as David Walters indicates that he wishes to receive it. The letter went on to say that under New York State family law, Diane Walters has the right to sue for dissolution of marriage on the grounds of abandonment after 1 year, which will be 365 days from this date. If Diane Walters wishes to file for dissolution of marriage at any time, have her representative contact Leanne Collins. Any necessary motions or pleadings on behalf of David Walters will be filed at that time. Have a good day. So it became clear that my husband was done. We had been together for almost 8 years, married for almost 4 of them, and that was the end of it. I had already pooped in my own bed, and now I had to lie in it. I spent the entire weekend trying to reach David's brother, his friends, his co-workers at the hospital. I even went to the hospital to try to find someone there who could tell me where David might be. I met an emergency room nurse there. Her name is Rhonda. She told me that she couldn't talk to me because she was very busy, but I could come see her the next day, and we could talk. I thanked her and left. The next day, I went to the address she gave me, and she actually let me in to talk. She offered me a drink. I asked for ice water. I needed to clear my head. She told me that she had shared with David that she had seen me at the restaurant with Darren. She said he was interested to know more about this Darren. Rhonda said she told him everything she knew about him, which wasn't much, but he was married, had a family, and his company did landscaping in her backyard. There wasn't much more to tell. She looked at me with a mixture of amazement and pity. I'm sure she thought I was a stupid idiot and had ruined my marriage to a married man, no less. As we talked, her kids ran in and out of the kitchen. She shouted at them every now and then and returned her attention to me. After asking a few more questions, I thanked her for her time and got up to leave. As I walked out the door, she mentioned that it was widely known at the hospital that David wouldn't be returning to work for a while. She stared after me as I got in my car and drove away. A month later, David, Newfoundland is a beautiful province. It has majestic scenery and very nice people. I was on the island for over a week, traveled many roads, and really enjoyed the scenery, people, and food. When I got to the Avalon Peninsula, I was confronted by a moose that decided to come out onto the road to see who I was. I managed to avoid the giant and stopped to watch him for a few minutes while he decided that maybe the road wasn't the right place for him. Good for him and good for any unlucky motorist who might have run into him. I had been warned that there were a lot of moose along the highway, so I only drove during the day. I was in a place called Petty Harbor, eating ice cream after visiting the easternmost part of North America, Cape Spear, and I got a flat tire on my bike. 4 different people offered to help me. You don't see that in Albany. I called the Auto Club, CAA in Canada, and they sent a truck to load my bike on it and take me to a repair shop. The repair shop was in St. John's, a fairly large city with a good selection of places to stay and great restaurants. I got a room in a small hotel in the center of town and went for a walk around town while my bike was being repaired and tuned up. It was a good place to take a break from riding, do laundry, and recharge my batteries. The hotel room was clean and comfortable, and it even had a small bar and restaurant. I stopped by the motorcycle repair shop again to have them do a modification for me, and while I was there, I happened to meet a woman who was also traveling across the country on a motorcycle. She was from Germany and was on her way to Morocco. She had traveled through Canada and was now heading to Africa to begin her journey around the continent. She was preparing her motorcycle for shipment from St. John's in a shipping container. She would fly to Casablanca via Lisbon and pick up the bike as soon as she arrived. It should have taken about a week to get the bike to Morocco. Her name was Emma Pfizer. She was originally from Berlin and worked for a travel company. She was dressed in riding gear, and although it wasn't the most flattering outfit, I immediately knew she was gorgeous. In my opinion, she was about 30 to 35 years old and about the same height as me. My height is 5 feet 11 inches, and I stand barefoot. She looked like that British actress who does the Mission Impossible movies, only with a sexy German accent. After talking some more about traveling by motorcycle and some of the things she had encountered on her journey across Canada, I asked when she was leaving, and it turned out to be only in 3 days. Then I asked her out to dinner, and she said yes. We were staying in hotels fairly close to each other and agreed to meet at a restaurant called the Salty Cod. Wow, an establishment by that name in Newfoundland. We ate, drank, got to know each other, and the next morning, I woke up in my hotel bed with a hand on my chest and a mane of dark hair spread across the pillows. She was gorgeous. I felt, well, it's hard to find the words to convey how good I felt. It was the best night I'd had in a while. For the first time in a long time, I felt good. We spent the whole next day together, talking a lot about traveling and how exciting it was to travel the world on a motorcycle. Her smile, her voice, and her eyes attracted me. I was immediately drawn to her. I got an erection at the mere sight of her. I was overcome with lust. After I shared my story with her and she shared hers, we talked about what we each had planned for the next few months. My plans, of course, included driving across North America. She had already driven almost 40,000 kilometers and planned to drive another 20,000 before heading home to Germany. Her plan was to drive around the coast of Africa. I thought it would be a much more interesting trip than the one I had planned. All the next day while I spent time with Emma, I thought about the pros and cons of changing my plan. I even called my father and talked to him to let him know that I was thinking about going to Africa. I figured he might think I was out of my mind if I just texted him and my mom that I was going to Africa and would see them later. We talked for almost an hour. At the end of the conversation, both he and Mom said that I should do whatever I want. This is my life, and I should make my own decisions about the path it will take. When I was a kid, my father used to tell me that fathers are where their children's dreams go to die. I didn't realize this until I grew up, and then I always thought it was a humorous but sadly realistic phrase my father used to say to me and my brother. Yes, I have a brother. He's 2 years older than me and married with 3 kids. He works with my dad at a construction company. Paul loves to build. He works very hard for his family, and his wife shows him respect for his hard work. Marcy quit her job to raise her children at home, and I have to tell you, I think it has paid off for them. She is a wonderful mother, and my parents love her to death. Their children are spoiled by their grandparents, but I digress. Let's get back to my plan. The next night, I asked Emma if she wanted some company on her journey through Africa. I didn't know if she had a boyfriend, husband, or soulmate she was going to meet, but I decided to play a little game and asked anyway. He who dares, wins. She looked at me with a smile and asked, "Are you saying you want to come to Africa?" She says bluntly. Yes, it is. What happened to your plan to travel North America? Well, you've opened my eyes a little bit, and I think Africa might be a more interesting place to visit. It's a little out of my comfort zone, but I think I need to challenge myself and see what happens. Maybe I'll do well, or maybe it will be terrible. Right now, I don't really know, but I think I'd like to find out. I'm still too close to Albany. I need some distance from my old life. You have an immediate problem. Your motorcycle is here and needs to get to Africa. I quickly called the store and asked if there was room in the shipping container for another motorcycle. The store owner called me back an hour later and said that if I could get there now and sign some paperwork, he could have my bike ready to ship the next morning. The logistics of shipping a motorcycle are pretty simple, but all it takes is enough money. 2 days later, I boarded a flight from St. John's to Toronto with Emma. From there, we flew to Paris and then, after a short wait, to Lisbon and Casablanca. When David talked about wanting to join me on the African part of my trip, I decided I needed to find out more about him before agreeing. I made a couple of calls to a friend from the office I work in back home in Berlin. Her husband works for the German police, and she asked if he could make some inquiries about one David Walters from Albany, New York, and confirmed that what he had told me about himself was true. My friend called me back very quickly and informed me that he was, as they say, the real deal. He worked as a physician in the emergency room at Albany General Hospital and was on sabbatical leave for 3 months with a possible extension to 6 months. He comes from a prominent family in Albany and is currently divorced from his wife of nearly 4 years. It appears she was having an affair with a married man. He graduated from medical school among the top of his class and has no children. It's amazing what the police can dig up without much effort. I even got a picture of him to make sure it was indeed the David Walters I was asking about. It was him, all right. Withholding this information, I was glad to be traveling with David. The fact that he was a doctor was good to know in case we had an accident and needed medical attention. But at the same time, I knew that he must be suffering greatly from his wife's infidelity to leave for such a long period of time and travel alone. I had a long-term partner, a man, and I can tell you that being cheated on by your partner is not something that can be tolerated for long. I ended my relationship by throwing all his stuff on the balcony of our apartment. He got the message. I can tell you that traveling alone is different. You can go wherever you want and whenever you want, but it can also be lonely. I have been on this journey for a few months now and have traveled over 30,000 kilometers. I plan to write a book about motorcycle travel from the perspective of a woman traveling alone. I've been taking photos and videos of every part of this journey, as well as keeping a detailed written diary. And it will probably take me a few months to edit it all and make it into something I can sell. I may be interested in doing all this, but it has to be interesting enough for others to pay money to read about my adventures. I have a friend back home who suggests I put some of my videos online. Maybe on YouTube or some other social networking site. David has a lot to learn about hardcore long-distance motorcycle travel, and the first task is to supply him with the best gear. He has. I called a motorcycle store in Casablanca, and they have almost everything he needs, and they know of other stores and outfitters in the area that can provide more things he'll need. It will be interesting to travel with Dr. David. I hope I can be a good tour guide. Diana. David's mother and father have made it clear that they want nothing more to do with me. They refuse to talk to me and won't tell me where David is. I don't know what to do about my marriage. It's becoming obvious that David and I are over, so what should I do? He hasn't started the divorce yet, and I'm not sure if I want to be the first to file for divorce. What if he comes back and changes his mind and wants to try to repair our marriage? What will I do if he gives me another chance? What will I do then? Will he be able to trust me again? I felt very lonely after Darren told me that we couldn't see each other anymore. His wife started to suspect something, and he was afraid that she might have hired an investigator to get evidence of his affair with me that she could use to punish him in the divorce. So that was over and done with. Besides, he was afraid that David might have told his wife that he was having fun with me. My social life is very modest, almost non-existent, but I can't take it anymore. I need to get out of the house. I need to see people and socialize. People at work often meet on Fridays after work. I'm going to start walking with them. The walls of the apartment are starting to cramp me. I really need a change of scenery. Casablanca is an amazing place. Casablanca, Arabic for Al-Dar Alba or Dar Alba, is Morocco's main port, located on the North African coast of the Atlantic Ocean. The city is home to about 4 million people and is an interesting mix of very old and very new and modern. I got us an inexpensive hotel room to stay in while we waited for the ship to arrive with our bikes. Emma drove me to a few places to purchase the necessary gear, and we played tourist, walking around the city, eating food, and learning about the history and culture. We learned that the ship was delayed 2 days due to bad weather in the Atlantic, and we ended up staying in Casablanca for 8 nights. Some of those nights were the best nights of my life, the others kept up Diana. Almost 2 months and no word from David. I need to start figuring out what to do. It looked like he was serious about getting rid of me. What did I do that was so wrong? I mean, he was never there for me. This damn hospital was the only thing he cared about. He has me alone, and he should have been there to take care of my needs too. I love him, but with his schedule and my schedule, we had very little time together. I have needs too. Darren actually stopped by the bank yesterday to see me. He figures his wife is no longer suspicious of what he does when he's not in the office, and we can start seeing each other again. When I told him that my husband left me, all he replied was that we could save on hotel bills by using my apartment. I need to get a man in me again soon, or I'm going to go crazy. I was hoping it would be David, but without him, I may have to make do with Darren. Damn it, David. I can't believe the beauty of Morocco. I also can't believe the beauty of Emma. The more I learn about her, the more I like her. Not only is she physically beautiful, but she's also very smart, resourceful, drives a motorcycle beautifully, has tons of common sense, and is not afraid to use it. She taught me a lot about real adventure writing. She told me that she has a longtime boyfriend referred to at home as a common-law husband, and she has no children. Her boyfriend decided he wanted to live with another woman and announced in a very correct manner that their relationship was over. She threw his crap over the railing of the apartment balcony and moved on with her life. In Casablanca, I bought a bunch of new equipment I needed to survive in these conditions. I now have a supply of gasoline and oil for my motorcycle, plenty of water for me, tools for repairs like fixing a flat tire or a broken chain. My bike has metal covers on the underside of the engine and extra LED headlights. I also have a battery and cables for recharging since none of our bikes have a Kickstarter. I have a new GPS system that detects even off-road routes and connects via satellites rather than cell phone signals. I have the best riding gear, a sleeping bag, and an inflatable pillow to sleep on for those nights when we stay in campgrounds away from towns and villages. I also have a small gas stove to heat water and food. I can even make coffee, which is a big deal. We plan to stay in small bed and breakfast inns as often as possible and eat local food. This proved to be interesting when we arrived in Morocco. My North American gut wasn't quite ready for the change in diet, and for the first few days, I had to stay close to the restroom. Emma found this very amusing as she was used to eating from all sorts of places. I bought some pills to help with my bowel movements. My med-school training had taken its toll, and I remembered that dehydration is not your friend. I drank more water, and all was well. I received a letter from my attorney to let me know that nothing was going on with Diane. She has been quiet and hasn't tried to send me anything. I guess she realized it was over between us or was trying to figure out what her options were and what she was going to do. I didn't care at all what she was doing. I only knew that what I was doing now was what I wanted. I didn't want a wife who wanted to spend time with another man. Hell, if she wanted another guy, why not just tell me that, and we could go our separate ways? But no, she couldn't be honest with me. She was supposed to be having fun with that landscaping guy. She had to pretend she still cared about me. What a load of crap that was. After leaving Casablanca, we drove south towards Marrakesh. It's about 250 kilometers on the main highway, the A3, but we decided to take a more indirect route through the port city of El Jadida. It was a hot day, but it was a great ride, and we enjoyed getting there on less direct roads. The town of El Jadida was very beautiful. We spent one night there and then traveled to El Jadouza, a town on the coast. Because it is so close to the water, the temperature there was a little cooler than inland, so I was able to acclimatize to that kind of terrain. Emma had never been here before, so it was a time for both of us to discover the region. Emma knows several languages: German, English, French, Spanish, and a little Arabic. In the short time we'd been in North Africa, she'd managed to use them all. God, I love her German accent, it's sexy as hell. The journey from Casablanca to Marrakesh took us 5 days and over 1,300 kilometers. It was without a doubt the best trip of my life. Safi and Essaouira were on our itinerary, and then we traveled east inland to the big city. Marrakesh is a city of about 1 million people. It is an amazing place. Again, combining old and new. Since neither of us had been there, I convinced Emma that we should stay for 3 days and play tourist, so we did. I was able to find an inexpensive hotel in town that had secure parking for our bikes. I didn't want them to be stripped of everything or stolen. We checked the bikes every day, and everything was fine. Emma rode a BMW F800 GS, and it was equipped with everything BMW can think of to make long-distance travel easier. I may come up with some of that later, but for now, the Africa Twin was doing just fine here in Africa, Diana. It's been over 2 months now, and I haven't heard from David or anyone he knows. I tried several more times to talk to his family, but each time I got a door slammed in my face. I called his attorney, but all she asked was if I was starting divorce proceedings or if I had a letter I wanted him to receive at some point. I didn't write a letter, and what the hell was I supposed to put in it? I wasn't going to get a divorce yet. I still wanted to talk to David and see if he was okay with staying married to me. After all, he's a great husband, and I know he'll be a great father when we have kids, if we have kids. But right now, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. I've had several different guys in my apartment for one night. Does that make me a bad person? Probably, yes, but maybe not. After all, my husband left me and went God knows where, no call, no text, no email to tell me what he's doing and when he'll be back. It would be nice to hear from him, David. Africa is so different from anything I grew up with, the culture, the language, the terrain, the food, the weather, everything. But at the same time, it is remarkably similar to home. The people here are pretty much the same. People want to take care of their families and homes. They want to make sure they have food on the table and a roof over their heads, just basic survival. Parents want a better life for their children. They want peace and security. Not every country on this continent has a stable government whose goal is the welfare of the people. In Morocco, the situation is better than in many other countries. Traveling with Emma was very educational. She is a real woman with an extraordinary sense of adventure. She is clearly unhappy unless she is challenged. I, on the other hand, am being challenged to give up my own fears of different things, places, and environments. I grew up in fairly safe New York State in a very stable family with a mother, father, and brother. I went to a good school and came home to a cozy and safe home. Not every family in the world can boast such luxury. One thing I have realized since I went on sabbatical is that people all over the world depend on their families and friends and take pride in the place where they live, no matter how humble it may be. Africa is a learning experience. Traveling is a learning experience. My eyes are being opened in ways I never imagined, and I am experiencing it with a remarkable woman. Emma is a wonderful companion and lover. She is passionate, caring, wild, and loves living on the edge. That doesn't mean she's stupid, just the opposite. She has a lot of common sense and is not afraid to use it. I'm overcome with lust for Emma and travel, lust for a new way of life. I don't think I can go back to the lifestyle I had in Albany. Emma Fisher, I really enjoyed being with Dr. David on this Africa trip. He is such a pleasure to be around. He is constantly amazed at the difference in things in life in Africa compared to his upbringing in the U.S. He has worked so hard to do the right things his whole life, university, medical school, family, and wife, and all of this led to his disappointment with the one person he thought would be with him forever. He thought his wife would support him in his profession and in the choices they made together, but she lost her way somewhere. I don't know her, and my mission is not to take her husband away from her, but from the looks of it, she did a good job of leaving him all by herself. We've only been together for a few weeks, but I can tell that if things continue the way they are now, we're going to have a hard time breaking up when he has to go back to work at the hospital. I have a plan that I made before I started my adventure, and I have to see it through. I have committed to a publishing house back home to write a guidebook for women who want to see the world on a motorcycle. I doubt I'll make much money from it, but I'm enjoying it. It's something I enjoy doing, and I think I'm good at it. David, we are on our way from Marv to Lewin. It's about 900 kilometers, and we are driving mostly on the coastal route. There is almost nothing on the long stretches, just dust and wide open spaces. The beauty is breathtaking and awe-inspiring at the same time. A greenhorn like me has to respect the environment and pay attention to what's going on around me. My American passport doesn't entitle me to much here. A passport issued by an EU member country is well recognized here. Border guards are often perplexed as to why an American is in a place like this and riding around on a motorcycle getting dirty. One customs officer asked me why I left America and came here. I smiled and pointed to Emma. He laughed, nodding his head. He knows why men do that. On the way to Elin, we camped for 2 nights. We made sure we were far from the road and would not be an easy target for night thieves. I must say that the first night I hardly slept at all. Every noise kept me awake and on high alert. On the second night, fatigue set in and I started sleeping more. In the morning, after some ablutions had been performed and coffee brewed on the stove, I felt much better. Motorcycle gasoline, water, and food were a priority for us, so we never passed a place to fill up and buy food. We always paid cash and never put down more than what the gas and groceries cost. It's best not to make a target of yourself. Not to say that West Africa is a dangerous place, no more dangerous than some parts of the U.S., but it never hurts to be aware of your surroundings and realize that 2 people on expensive motorcycles must have some money on them, so they are immediately a target for a thief looking to make an easy buck. My equipment protects me from falls, but it is no match for a gun or knife. I know full well the damage a tiny gun can do. I've seen it too many times in the ER at my house. Great entertainment. The trip south through Western Sahara and Mauritania was unlike anything I'd ever seen or experienced in my life. The landscape was like the moon must have been. It was dry, dusty, brutal, and beautiful all at the same time. As we drove, we were able to talk to each other through Bluetooth helmet communication devices. Emma kept telling me about the region as if she had lived here for years. She was the editor of a travel magazine and had researched the area very well before leaving home. It was all amazing to me. I loved it, but at the same time, I was scared to death. Scared because it was so foreign to my white American upbringing. Did I mention that Emma talked nonstop? Her voice was mesmerizing. I could listen to that woman read the Berlin phone book. I swear I got a boner while I was riding my bike, all because of her voice. Our goal after leaving Wuhan was to get to Derer in Senegal. It was over 1,800 kilometers. This meant 4 days of pretty intense driving. I had managed to increase the distance, but now had to cover it in the heat and dust everywhere. Emma reminds me to drink water about 10 times a day. I have a Camelback flask that holds 4 liters of water, and I empty it every day, plus more when we finish. A few times I've had to stop to empty my bladder on the side of the road, but it makes me laugh when Emma has to do the same. I tried to take a picture of her squatting to pee. It didn't work. She chased after me and snatched the phone out of my hands. I was laughing so hard I was having trouble breathing. I could tell you about the trip through Western Sahara and Mauritania, but that would be repeating the same thing 4 times, lots of wide open spaces with absolutely nothing on them. I've mentioned before that we never once passed a place to buy gasoline. We both carried an extra 10 liters of fuel on our motorcycles, and we had to use it a couple of times. My motorcycle is a little bigger in engine displacement, so it uses a little more gasoline than Emma's BMW. I'm going to buy an extra gas tank to attach to the bike. We had a breakdown and had to repair on the side of the road. It cost us about 3 hours, but that's the price you pay. We spent 3 nights in the tent, and it's just amazing how you can be intimate with a woman when you haven't had a chance to shower beforehand. The smell of human body odor when it had been hot and sweaty all day was something I was used to. Making love to Emma in a tiny tent in the desert after several such long days with no water to take a bath was different, but it was still amazing. Neither of us went near certain parts of the other's body with our mouths, but our hands were there. I know it sounds gross, but that's life and said sex and maybe the beginning of love. We did a little bit of washing, a little water and soap on a washcloth to wash all the necessary body parts, and we used a cup of water each to brush our teeth. Cleanliness is, well, you get the picture. We crossed the Senegal's border at Dama. The crossing at Rosso is much more complicated and requires paying money to just about everyone who has any control over the crossing to get to the other side of the river. We learned from other bikers that there is a bridge at Diama, and crossing it is less costly. Not too far from the bridge is the city of St. Louis. This is not the St. Louis you are most likely familiar with, it's very different. I knew from research beforehand that the city is divided into different parts, some of which are on islands. When we arrived in the city, it looked like something I had only seen in movies. The poverty was astounding. However, as we drove over the bridge, we saw another part of the city that clearly had money. We found a nice and inexpensive hotel, Hotel de Laos, secured our bikes, and cleaned up. The hotel was next to a large government building, so there was always a police presence nearby. This meant there was much less crime in the area, good for us. I told Emma that I needed some rest after crossing the desert. She laughed her infectious smile and agreed that we could both use a decent bed to sleep in. We spent the next 2 days in that bed. At times we got very little sleep. We went out for food a few times and swam in the hotel pool. The hotel even has a laundry room, so we got our clothes in order. I know what you're thinking, a rich guy from the US can buy anything he wants in Africa. Well, most of the big houses in this part of St. Louis are owned by locals, not Westerners, so park your outrage. Also, everything is a little cheaper in this part of the world than in the US. $50 a night for a nice hotel room that would cost $200 in the States is not uncommon. I usually check my email when I had a good Wi-Fi connection. I wanted to see if my family had sent me anything and if my lawyer wanted to pass anything on to me. It was mostly my mom and dad asking where I was, if everything was okay, and if I was having a good time. This time, the lawyer gave me an update. It seems Diane had written a letter asking where I was and when I would be back in Albany. I asked my parents not to report my whereabouts, and my attorney was under strict orders to do the same. She told me that Diane had not yet initiated any divorce action. I figured she would file for divorce soon. After all, she was the one who needed sex outside of our marriage, and she had already been having fun with her boyfriend for 2 years. 2 years. What I was doing now was none of her damn business as far as I was concerned. It was over between us, finished.